I still remember that summer night in Portland as if it happened yesterday. I was 24, living with my parents, Robert and Linda, in our blue two-story craftsman house. It stood on a quiet tree-lined street, its white trim a little chipped, its porch swing creaking each time the wind shifted. It wasn't glamorous, but it had been home for all my life. At that age, I was working as a bookkeeper for a warehouse company on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't the dream job, but it paid the bills, and I was steadily saving with the hope of one day affording a small place of my own. That June evening was my younger sister Emily's birthday. She was turning 22, and my parents had decided to throw her a large celebration. Friends, relatives, and neighbors filled the house. The smell of catered food lingered in the air, balloons floated above the living room, and a three-tiered white cake sat in the center of the dining table, glowing under soft yellow lights. Everyone seemed eager to celebrate Emily, the child my parents had always praised as their star. When dinner was done, my father tapped his glass. "Everyone," he announced, his voice strong and cheerful, "we have a very special gift for Emily tonight." My mother beamed at his side, holding Emily's hand like she was presenting royalty. Then came the small velvet box. Emily opened it slowly, her eyes widening when she saw the shiny brass key inside. Gasps of delight spread around the room. My father held up a glossy photograph for everyone to see. It was a picture of a brand-new townhouse in the Pearl District. "This," he declared proudly, "is Emily's new home. 3 bedrooms, a balcony with a city view. Worth $650,000. A place she can truly call her own." Applause and cheers filled the room. I clapped as well, though my chest felt hollow. My hands shook, but I forced a smile. It was Emily's moment, and I didn't want to ruin it, at least not yet. Then my mother turned to me. Her smile sharpened. "And you, Sarah, will move in with Emily," she said sweetly but firmly. "You can help her run the house, keep things in order. Think of it as practice for when you're ready for responsibility. You'll be her maid until then." The word struck me like ice water poured down my spine. Maid. Was that all they saw in me? I swallowed hard. "No," I said, my voice steady though my heart pounded. "I am not her maid, and I never will be." The room grew silent. My father's smile vanished. His jaw set, his eyes narrowed. "Then you do not deserve to live in this house," he said flatly. His words cut like a blade. All around me, people avoided my eyes. Even Emily looked down at her lap. The laughter, the joy, it all turned into a suffocating quiet. The cake, still untouched, suddenly looked like a snowfield no one dared to walk across. I stood frozen for a moment. My mother's voice broke the silence. "Ungrateful girl," she muttered, shaking her head. "Always dramatic, always disappointing." Something inside me snapped. Without another word, I turned and walked upstairs. In my room, I grabbed a duffel bag and stuffed it with clothes, my toothbrush, and the framed photo of me and my best friend Laura at the Oregon coast. That photo was my reminder that at least one person believed in me. Before leaving, I placed my house key on the hallway table. It didn't belong to me anymore. I stepped outside into the cool night air. I had $2,400 in my bank account, a 10-year-old Honda Civic parked at the curb, and no home to return to. My parents' voices floated faintly from the house, but I didn't look back. The next morning, I drove to Laura's apartment in Northeast Portland. She opened the door in pajamas, took one look at me with my duffel, and pulled me inside. Without asking a single question, she handed me a mug of coffee and her spare key. "Stay as long as you need," she said gently. I nearly cried from relief. Her apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, a squeaky couch, and thin walls that let in the noise of the street. She rented out the second room to me for $900 a month. It wasn't much, but it was freedom, and that meant more than anything. I worked extra shifts at the warehouse, often coming home past midnight with sore feet and aching hands. On weekends, I did side work, managing budgets for a small bakery. They paid me $200 a week for balancing their books and organizing invoices. It wasn't glamorous, but it added to my savings. Every dollar I earned, I guarded carefully. Sometimes, after long days, I walked past a row of empty storefronts near the bus line. One of them had dusty windows and a faded sign hanging crooked above the door. I'd stop, press my hand to the glass, and imagine light pouring through those windows, shelves filled with something beautiful, and customers walking inside with smiles. I didn't yet know what kind of business it could be, but I knew this. I wanted a place of my own. I wanted to hold a key that unlocked a door no one could take from me. Lying awake at night, I replayed my father's words. "You do not deserve to live in this house." They stung, but they also lit a fire. If I didn't deserve their house, I would build my own. If they saw me as nothing more than a servant to Emily, I would show them I was far more than that. The pain of rejection was real, but so was the determination it sparked. I had been stripped of the safety net I thought I had, but in its place, I found something stronger: resolve. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had a vision: to create something that belonged to me alone, something no one could belittle or take away. That summer, while Emily moved into her townhouse, paraded through Instagram photos with friends, and lived off the luxury gifted to her, I worked quietly. Each shift, each spreadsheet, each saved dollar was a step forward. My family had no idea, and that was fine with me. In fact, the silence gave me space to dream bigger. I knew one thing for certain. The night they cast me out was the night my real life began. When I first left my parent house, I thought survival meant keeping my job at the warehouse and saving enough to one day rent a better apartment. For months, my days looked the same. Long hours under fluorescent lights, spreadsheets that blurred together, and late-night walks back to Laura's apartment. Yet, deep inside me, a voice kept whispering that I was meant for something bigger. That voice grew louder the first time I picked up an old table at a yard sale. It was a plain wooden thing, scratched and wobbling, marked at $15. Laura and I bought it on a whim. I spent one Saturday sanding it down, staining it a warm walnut, and tightening the joints. By Sunday, I had listed it online for $150. To my shock, it sold in just an hour. The buyer handed me cash with a smile and said, "This looks like new." I stood there holding the bills, my heart racing. For the first time since being thrown out of my family's house, I felt possibility instead of loss. That table became the spark. I bought 2 more, then 5, then 10. Each piece came from garage sales, thrift shops, or even sidewalks where people left furniture for free. I would sand, polish, and repair until the wood gleamed. Then I'd photograph the pieces carefully and post them online. My tiny ledger became my treasure, columns of costs, sales, and profits that proved I was building something with my own 2 hands. By fall, I had filled Laura's garage with chairs, desks, and coffee tables in various stages of repair. The smell of sawdust clung to me day and night. Laura joked that her car had been permanently evicted from its own garage, but she cheered me on with every sale. Still, the work was cramped, and I knew I needed more space if this was to grow. In November, I walked past that same faded storefront I'd been staring at for months. This time, there was a new sign. For lease, $1,100 per month. My heart pounded as I stood at the glass, imagining the space filled with polished wood, light spilling through clean windows, and customers browsing. It terrified me, but it also thrilled me. I went home, ran the numbers again and again, and realized if I sold just 8 pieces a week with a profit of $70 each, I could cover rent and still eat. It was a thin line, but I believed in myself enough to try. With trembling hands, I signed the lease. I named the shop North River Goods, after the Willamette River just 2 blocks away. The first night in that space, I lay on the bare floor staring at the ceiling. My future no longer belonged to anyone else, it was mine. I painted the walls bright white, laid a rug I found at a second-hand shop, and built a counter from reclaimed oak. On opening day, I had only a few pieces lined up: a small writing desk, 2 chairs, and a coffee table. Still, the door opened, and people came in. A teacher bought the desk for $220. A young couple who had just moved from Denver bought the coffee table. By the end of that first month, I had made nearly $12,800 in revenue, with almost $3,000 in profit. To me, it felt like a fortune. One afternoon, a woman named Grace walked in. She ran a company that managed short-term rental properties across the city. She walked slowly around the shop, inspecting every corner, then turned to me and said, "You have an eye. Do you take custom orders?" My throat went dry, but I forced myself to nod. She needed 20 nightstands for her rentals. I quoted her $180 each, leaving a modest $40 profit per piece. For 3 weeks, I worked day and night, barely sleeping, to meet her deadline. When I delivered them, she handed me a check for $3,600 and said, "Call me when you're ready for more." That check did more than pay my bills. It told me I was on the right path. Word of mouth spread. Soon, I wasn't just fixing old tables. I was taking custom orders for desks, shelving units, and dining tables. My hands blistered. My back ached, but I had never felt more alive. As demand grew, I realized I couldn't do everything alone. I hired my first helper, Luis, a careful man in his 40s who worked part-time for $18 an hour. A month later, I brought on Mia, a college student who loved power tools and wasn't afraid of long hours. Together, we turned the shop into a small but bustling place. I learned to draft invoices, manage payroll, and calculate margins. I met suppliers who provided reclaimed oak and maple from old barns, giving my furniture a unique touch. By the following summer, North River Goods was open 6 days a week. Our monthly revenue climbed to nearly $38,000, with around $9,000 in profit. I finally paid Laura back for every dollar she had ever loaned me. Adding interest, she tried to refuse, but I insisted on giving. That repayment felt like closing one chapter and opening another. With a steady income, I rented my own one-bedroom apartment near the shop for $1,350 a month. It wasn't luxurious, but it had high ceilings, a big window, and most importantly, it was mine. I bought a second-hand delivery van for $7,000, painted the shop's name on the side, and drove it with pride. Still, the memories of my family lingered. At night, after closing, I'd stand in the shop surrounded by polished pieces ready for customers. The scent of lemon oil and sawdust filled the air. I would think about the brass key my parents had handed Emily that night, about the cold words my father had spoken to me. Oddly, I didn't feel the anger as sharply anymore. What I felt instead was momentum, a sense that I was finally building a life that no one could strip from me. Busy had become my cure. Each order, each customer, each ledger entry pulled me further from the pain of that night and closer to the future I was creating. North River Goods was still small, but it was alive, and so was I. The turning point came 3 years after I had opened North River Goods. By then, the shop had become a steady, reliable source of income. We had a growing base of loyal customers in Portland, and through word of mouth, we were selling not just to homeowners but also to small offices and restaurants. Still, I knew if I wanted to scale beyond being just a shop, I needed a breakthrough. That breakthrough came in the form of a single phone call from Seattle. A hotel developer had stumbled upon our website. His voice was brisk and professional as he explained the scope of his request: 100 desks, 100 chairs, and 50 dining tables, all to furnish a new boutique hotel in the heart of the city. The total order came to $210,000. I remember staring at the figure written in my notebook, my pulse quickening. It was more than I had ever dreamed of handling at once. Fear and excitement battled inside me. If I said yes and failed, I could ruin everything I had built. But if I said no, I would stay small forever. I took a deep breath and said, "Yes, we can handle it." Immediately, I called everyone I trusted. Luis and Mia were the first. Their faces lit up when I told them about the order, though I could see the worry flicker in their eyes. To meet this challenge, I knew we had to grow. I rented a small warehouse in North Portland for $5,800 per month. The space was raw and industrial, but it gave us room to breathe, room to create. We moved the shop's retail section into the front and turned the back into a production line. I hired a plant manager, a steady man named Owen, for $72,000 a year. He brought discipline to the chaos, organizing schedules and ensuring every piece met the highest standards. We also added 2 more carpenters at $22 an hour and brought in a part-time bookkeeper to keep our finances straight. For weeks, the warehouse buzzed from dawn until midnight. The hum of saws and the scent of fresh wood filled the air. When we finally delivered the hotel order, 2 days ahead of schedule, I held my breath waiting for feedback. The buyer's email came the next morning. Clean lines, on budget, and no excuses. Impressive. I read the words 3 times. That single note opened the door to 2 more hotel groups within weeks. Suddenly, I wasn't running a shop anymore. I was building a company. By year 4, I knew we needed a name that carried weight beyond a storefront. I rebranded us as Heartline Furnishings, drawing from my family name but reshaping it into something of my own. The logo was simple, block letters with a thin underline, clean and professional. We launched a new website that allowed customers to build their orders online, select finishes, and request quotes instantly. The orders grew bolder. A hotel in Denver requested 200 custom nightstands. A cafe in Boston wanted unique tables that could withstand heavy use but still look elegant. A co-working space in Chicago needed large communal desks and sleek chairs. I flew to each city myself, tape measure in hand, shaking hands with managers and walking through empty rooms that would soon hold our work. Every trip taught me how to negotiate, how to listen to client needs, and how to trust my instincts. In year 5, I received a call that felt like a test of everything I had built. A small investment firm in New York had noticed our rapid growth. One of the partners flew out to meet me. He wore tailored gray suits and spoke with careful precision, the kind of man who never wasted a word. He offered $4 million for a minority stake to help us expand further. I didn't want to rush. I gathered my closest advisors, Owen, Grace, and of course Laura, and we sat around my dining table late into the night. We debated risk, growth, and control. In the end, I decided to take half of what he offered, $2 million, with a contract that allowed me to buy back his share within 3 years at a fair return. It gave us capital without tying my hands. With that money, we expanded aggressively. We hired a second shift, bought a CNC machine for $320,000 that cut production time dramatically, and added a finishing line that had drying times. We invested in better delivery trucks and safety equipment for the team. By the end of that year, Heartline Furnishings had reached $18.6 million in revenue, with $2.7 million in profit. I gave every employee a raise and introduced health insurance. For many of them, it was the first time they had ever had that kind of stability. Around the same time, I bought my first home, a small but beautiful house on the edge of Portland for $540,000. It had a pear tree in the yard, a kitchen with long counters, and a porch that caught the golden light of sunset. On Sundays, I would sit there with a notebook, writing out goals. Build 1 more plant within 2 years. Keep profit margins above 12%. Never lie to a customer. Be the kind of boss who knows birthdays without needing a calendar. By year 8, Heartline Furnishings had grown beyond what I ever imagined. We opened a second plant near Tacoma, doubling our production capacity. We supplied mid-market hotel chains across the western United States. We partnered with 3 design studios in New York and 1 in London, marking our first step into Europe. I still remember seeing our name on invoices bound for overseas. It felt surreal. One day, a national business magazine published a short article about our rise. They called me a founder with grit. I clipped the page and tucked it in a drawer, embarrassed to look at it too often. To me, I was still the same woman sanding tables in a cramped garage, just with more people by my side now. As the company grew, people occasionally asked about my family. Are they proud of you? They'd wonder. I always gave the same careful answer. We're not close. It was true. My parents never called, and I never reached out to them. Sometimes, late at night, I would drive past the old blue house where I grew up. The paint was peeling, and the porch swing still creaked in the wind. I would sit in my car for a moment, staring at the windows, wondering if they ever thought about me. Then I'd drive away, reminding myself that my real home was the one I had built brick by brick, table by table. Heartline Furnishings wasn't just a company. It was proof. Proof that being cast out hadn't broken me. Proof that the brass key they once gave to Emily wasn't the only kind of future a daughter could hold. My key was different, hard-earned, scarred by sweat, but entirely mine. 10 years had passed since that night in Portland when my parents handed Emily the brass key and told me I didn't deserve a home. 10 years since I had walked out with nothing but a duffel bag and $2,400. In that decade, my life had transformed so completely that sometimes even I struggled to recognize it. Heartline Furnishings was no longer just a business. It was an empire in the making. We had 2 plants operating at full capacity, one in Portland and another in Tacoma. A third was under construction outside Boise. Our name was etched onto contracts with hotels, offices, and design firms across the United States, and our pieces had even crossed the Atlantic into London. The company's value had been appraised at over $120 million, though I rarely thought about numbers in that way. What mattered more to me were the 120 employees who showed up every day, building not only furniture, but a shared future. It was on a warm September morning when the past walked back into my life. My assistant's voice buzzed over the intercom. "A woman named Emily is here. She says she's your sister and needs to see you." The words made the air heavy in my office. For a moment, I just stared at the oak desk beneath my hands, tracing the grain of the wood. Emily. The last time I had seen her, she was glowing in the center of a birthday party, clutching the key to her new townhouse while I stood with empty hands. I told my assistant to bring her to the conference room. The room had floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides, filling the space with light. A long oak table stretched down the center, built by our own team. The walls displayed photographs of our projects in Denver, Seattle, and Boston, rooms furnished with pieces that had once only existed in my imagination. Emily walked in wearing a navy blazer, neat but slightly wrinkled, as though it had seen too many interviews already. Her eyes held the same blue they always had, but now they carried a shadow of worry. She hesitated before speaking. "Hi," she said softly. "You look different." "So do you," I replied, my voice calm, though my chest felt tight. We sat across from each other. She began to speak quickly, as though the words might escape if she didn't get them out. She told me the townhouse had been sold years ago. Our parents, Robert and Linda, had retired to a smaller place after their finances collapsed. Emily had worked in marketing for a while, but she had been laid off during budget cuts. For 3 months, she had been searching for work, growing more desperate with each passing week. A friend had mentioned that Heartline Furnishings was hiring. She had come in without realizing who owned the company, and only when she saw my name on the lobby wall had the truth hit her. Her voice cracked when she said, "You own this. You built this." "We didn't know." "I didn't know." I sat quietly, letting the words hang between us. My mind drifted back to that night 10 years ago, to the sting of humiliation, to the silence that followed when no one spoke up for me. But I also remembered the tiny victories, the first table I sold for $150, the first check from Grace for the nightstands, the first time I handed Luis his paycheck and saw pride flicker across his face. Those memories were heavier than bitterness. "I started with a small shop," I said finally. "1 table at a time. We grew from there." I didn't bother listing the numbers, though they pulsed in my mind. Last quarter's revenue was $5.2 million. The valuation offers that crossed my desk. The hundreds of orders we shipped each month. None of that felt necessary to say out loud. Emily looked down at her hands, twisting them in her lap. "I came to ask for a job," she admitted.
"Any job."
"I can start at the front desk." Her voice was almost a whisper. I studied her face. In her, I saw echoes of the girl who had smiled shyly as our parents handed her the townhouse keys, the girl who hadn't said a word when they told me to live as her maid. But I also saw something else, tiredness, humility, maybe even regret. For a long time I said nothing. I thought about the people who had opened doors for me. Laura, who gave me her spare key, Grace, who trusted me with 20 nightstands, Owen, who steadied the factory floor. And I thought about the people who had closed doors, slamming them in my face. My family belonged to the second group, yet here was Emily sitting across from me, asking me to open one now. Finally I spoke. Here's what I can offer, I said. We have an open role in customer care. It pays $54,000 a year with health benefits and a small bonus if targets are met. It is not a gift, it's work. You'll report to Hannah, not to me. You'll start on a 90-day trial like everyone else. If you do well, you stay. If not, you leave. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded quickly.
Thank you, she said.
I won't waste it. I rose from my chair and gestured for her to follow me to the wide windows overlooking the plant floor. Below us, dozens of employees moved with practiced rhythm, sanding, assembling, staining, packaging. The air buzzed with motion, but it was steady, like a heartbeat. This place isn't about me, I told her. It's about them. We build good things here, and we tell the truth. If you want to be part of this, that's what you live by. She nodded again, her expression solemn. That evening, after she left, I locked my office and drove home. The sun was sinking low, casting golden light across the road. When I reached my house, I sat on the porch as the pear tree swayed in the breeze. I thought about the girl I had been at 24, leaving her family's house with nothing but a duffel bag and a heart full of shame. And I thought about the woman I had become, running a company worth millions, employing people who relied on me, holding a future no one had given but that I had built with my own hands. I didn't know if my parents would ever understand the choices they made, or the one I made when I walked away. But I knew this much. I had turned the key to my own door, and it had opened a life I never could have imagined. And this time, no one could take it from me.